You see, people often assume that when you finally break away from a narcissist, the story ends in that moment. But that assumption is completely off. The actual story begins the moment you reclaim your space, because when a narcissist realizes they no longer have a grip on you, they don't fade quietly into the background. They unravel. Their carefully polished exterior begins to fracture, and what emerges is both unsettling and revealing in ways most people never expect. This is where the true shift happens, when someone who has manipulated you for years suddenly loses the ability to shape your reactions. Something fascinating rises to the surface. The narcissist's practiced charm, the smooth friendliness, the artificial warmth, starts to melt away, and what replaces it is not acceptance or resignation. It's rage, quiet, controlled, simmering rage. It's the anger of someone who has lost their influence yet cannot afford to let that loss show openly, and that right there becomes one of the clearest signs that you've actually overcome them. People often misunderstand a narcissist's charm. They mistake it for genuine confidence. They think it's charisma, authority, or inner strength. But none of that is real. It's a performance, a well-rehearsed act meant to draw you in, to make you admire them, rely on them, crave their approval. Their charm is a tool, not a trait. It's not meant to connect, it's meant to control. And the moment you stop responding to it, the moment you refuse to be hypnotized by flattery or intimidated by presence, their entire psychological scaffolding begins to collapse. This doesn't mean they'll erupt in obvious ways. It doesn't mean yelling or throwing things. Often the most dangerous form of anger is silent, contained, hiding beneath the surface like a storm sealed behind a wall of glass. You'll notice it in their eyes. The smile that feels too tight, the slight tremble at the corner of their mouth, the tone that suddenly turns flat and rigid once they realize their old tricks no longer work. It feels as though you've flipped on a light inside a room they kept locked and dark for years, and now, exposed, they can't charm you, guilt you, or diminish you anymore, and that is unbearable to them. Understand something important, that silent rage is not really about you. It's about what you symbolize. You've become the one thing they cannot bend, and that threatens the illusion that holds their identity together. Narcissists live inside a fragile, self-constructed world. It's like a maze of mirrors where every reflection tells them what they want to believe, that they are admired, respected, powerful, superior. But the moment you step outside that illusion and say, "I see who you actually are," it's like shattering one of those mirrors. Suddenly, the entire structure trembles. That's when they start to shift. The voice that once sounded self-assured grows clipped, tense. The person who once laughed easily now looks at you as though your presence insults them. Their silence becomes heavier, colder. You can almost sense it, an invisible wall rising between the two of you. They won't admit they're angry. Doing so feels like surrender to them. But their energy, dense, sharp, suffocating, tells you everything. That silent rage is the emotional equivalent of a violent storm they're trying desperately to hold inside. I once spoke with someone, a young woman, who described the moment she walked away from a long relationship with someone deeply narcissistic. She said that when she finally set a boundary, refused to argue, and stepped out of the room mid-conversation, he didn't shout, he didn't chase after her. He just stared with this hollow, frozen expression and then went utterly quiet. She said, "It was the quietest moment of my life, but somehow the loudest thing I'd ever felt." That was the moment he realized he had lost control, not because she won a fight, but because she refused to fight at all. And beneath that silence, beneath that cold fury, was something even deeper: shame. That is the layer people rarely talk about. Underneath the rage is a profound sense of inadequacy. You've handed them a reflection they cannot bear, one that whispers, "You are not in control. You are not as invincible as you pretend." For someone whose entire identity is built on maintaining dominance and receiving admiration, that realization feels like emotional annihilation. But this is where your true strength begins to surface. When you can witness that shift, the charm disintegrating, the hostility rising, without internalizing it, without making it your burden, you become untouchable in a way that terrifies the narcissist. Because what you've reclaimed is something they cannot take back: your autonomy, your dignity, your sense of peace. So when you see that silent fury, when their eyes grow distant and cold, when their charm evaporates and the atmosphere thickens with tension, don't panic. Don't question your worth. Recognize it for exactly what it is: confirmation. It's proof that you've broken the spell. You've stepped outside the illusion. You've stopped fueling the hunger of someone who thrived on your confusion and vulnerability. And that's not easy. It takes courage to stop seeking approval from someone who has built their entire identity around withholding it. It takes resilience to remain calm when their silence is engineered to provoke guilt or fear. But if you hold steady, if you stay centered in that moment, you win. Not because you defeated them in a battle, but because you refused to participate in it. That is the real victory. The narcissist's charm transforms into a chilling quietness because for the very first time, they've met someone who cannot be fooled. And if you're standing in that place, if you've reached that point, you've accomplished something extraordinary. You've reclaimed your identity from someone who tried to distort it. That is the moment you stop merely surviving them and begin rising far beyond them. Something else happens when you begin to outgrow a narcissist. When you stop reacting to their provocations and begin acting from true inner strength, they don't simply fade into the distance. They alter their approach, but not in a way that signals growth or maturity. They start imitating you. They begin to mirror your confidence, your independence, your emotional stability. But it's only a facade. They cannot generate these qualities from within. They can only mimic them like an actor copying a role. You have to understand the mechanics behind this behavior. Narcissists are not creators of identity. They assemble one. They collect traits the way someone might gather scraps to build a mask. They scavenge for admiration, attention, validation, energy, anything they can use to construct the appearance of a self. Their entire sense of identity is reflective, not authentic. So when you defeat them emotionally, when you pull away, draw boundaries, and grow stronger, they feel the emptiness beneath their borrowed persona. And instead of facing that emptiness, they choose to imitate you. It's a bizarre thing to witness. The person who once mocked your dreams suddenly speaks as though they've discovered purpose. The person who dismissed your values begins posting inspirational messages that sound oddly familiar. Their tone, their phrasing, even their newly acquired wisdom resembles yours. But it's not admiration, it's duplication. They're trying to regain control by becoming the very person who destabilized their illusion. Why do they do this? Because for them, imitation is survival. Their identity is parasitic. They cannot grow on their own. They don't develop authenticity, they harvest it. When you evolve, when you become stronger and more grounded, you expose the emptiness they've spent their whole life trying to hide. So they do what hollow things do. They echo. But don't mistake this imitation for genuine transformation. It's not. It's camouflage. They're trying to conceal the humiliation they feel from losing their influence by pretending they've evolved. It's like a predator slipping into the skin of the one who escaped it, hoping the disguise will restore control. The appearance shifts, but the motives remain unchanged. And if you're not careful, this imitation can pull you back in. You might think, maybe they've finally changed. Maybe they understand now. But what's really happening is far more unsettling. They're studying you. They're examining how your strength works so they can appropriate it. They're learning your emotional movements the way someone learns the steps to a dance, not to dance with you, but to lead you back into the old pattern. I've seen this happen repeatedly, in relationships, in families, in workplaces, even in therapy sessions. When one person truly starts to grow, those who depended on their weakness begin to mimic that growth, not to join them in becoming better, but to compete with them. The narcissist does not want to be strong alongside you. They want the appearance of being stronger than you, and that reveals something profound. Imitation is their final defense. It's their last attempt to maintain superiority. But there's a flaw in their strategy. They cannot sustain what they imitate. Real strength doesn't come from copying someone else's behavior. It comes from inner truth, from self-awareness, from the willingness to confront your own flaws. Copying another person's growth is like planting plastic flowers. They may look convincing for a moment, but they will never bloom. It comes from suffering, from facing yourself honestly, from taking ownership of the disorder and pain in your own life. The narcissist runs from all of that. They can imitate your confidence, but they cannot withstand your discipline. They can echo your language, but they cannot reproduce your integrity. So eventually, their disguise begins to loosen. It always does. Imagine someone holding a mask over their face with both hands. They can keep it there temporarily, but they can't eat like that, can't breathe comfortably, can't live with any sense of ease. Sooner or later, exhaustion sets in and the mask starts slipping. That's what happens when a narcissist tries to impersonate your strength. They wear your identity like a costume until the real world demands truth, and then they collapse because they never built the inner foundation required to maintain what they pretend to be. Now, when you witness this unraveling, when the narcissist begins repeating your expressions, shifting their clothing to resemble yours, mimicking your gestures, behaving as though they've suddenly discovered who they are, don't get angry. Don't get bewildered. See it for what it is, undeniable proof of your victory. You have become the benchmark they compare themselves to. You've become the blueprint they can't surpass. That is a different kind of power, not the loud kind, but the kind that exists naturally and doesn't need applause. And if you want to remain free, you must continue moving forward, because the moment you stop evolving, they will catch up just enough to attempt mirroring you again. Keep growing, keep sharpening yourself. Don't allow their imitation to pull you back into the trap of wanting their recognition. The most effective way to defeat a narcissist a second time is to outgrow the version of yourself they are still attempting to counterfeit. So when you notice them copying your strength, smile inwardly, because what they're truly saying, without the ability to ever confess it, is that you have become everything they only pretended to be. You have become solid. You have become genuine. And all they can do now is stand in your shadow, struggling to recreate a light that comes naturally to you. You know, one of the most striking moments in the collapse of a narcissist occurs when their mask begins to slip in front of others. It's astonishing and heartbreaking because it reveals what's been hidden the entire time. A desperate, fragile, terrified inner self concealed beneath the illusion of dominance. For years, sometimes decades, they've polished that mask. The charm, the assertiveness, the perfect timing in conversations, the command over social situations, all of it carefully rehearsed. But when you defeat them, when you expose their manipulation and refuse to participate in their narrative, the mask doesn't just crack in private. It starts slipping publicly. And that is when the entire performance begins to disintegrate. You must understand the magnitude of this for them. The narcissist lives not for authenticity, but for perception. Their whole identity rests not on who they are, but on how they appear. They don't chase truth, they chase admiration. And for a long time, that image holds up. They persuade people with practiced humility, with well-timed charm, with seemingly unwavering self-assurance. But the moment you withdraw your validation, the moment you no longer reinforce their illusion, they lose control over the story they've been cultivating. And when their grip on the narrative loosens, so does the mask. I've witnessed this countless times. Perhaps it's a supervisor who always seemed calm, articulate, and firmly in command. Then one employee stops yielding to their pressure, stops accepting unfair treatment, starts asserting themselves. And then one day, during a meeting, that supervisor snaps. Just briefly, the cool exterior vanishes, the voice sharpens, the gaze hardens. The room grows still. Everyone notices. The mask has slipped, and once that fracture is visible, it cannot be unseen. The image of the flawless leader disintegrates before people's eyes. It's the same dynamic in personal relationships. The narcissist who always dazzled mutual friends, who always commanded attention, who always seemed composed, begins to unravel the moment the person they used to dominate starts speaking the truth. They'll overreact to something trivial, a comment, a casual observation, a harmless question, and for a split second, the darkness beneath the charm pushes through. Their expression tightens, their posture shifts, and you glimpse the hostility that's been there the entire time, just concealed beneath layers of performance. And others notice it too. That's the moment the image collapses. Truth has a way of splitting deception open. It's like sunlight melting thin frost. No matter how expertly crafted, the mask cannot withstand the heat of authenticity. When you refuse to participate in the narcissist's fictional version of events, you become that sunlight. You illuminate the distance between who they pretend to be and who they really are. And that exposure is devastating to them because what they dread most is not losing you, it's losing their audience. Think of it this way: the narcissist's mask is like a theatrical costume. It only works when the lights are dim and the audience is far enough away not to notice the seams. But when the lights brighten, when observers get a closer look, they begin to see the stitching, the fabric, the paint beneath the makeup. The magic evaporates. And when this metaphorical spotlight hits them in real life, when coworkers, relatives, or friends begin to see the cracks, the narcissist starts to unravel. They lash out, they whine, they explain frantically, they rewrite the moment. "You misunderstood me. That's not what I meant. You're twisting my words. Can't you take a joke?" But the illusion has already been punctured. The truth has been seen, and once truth is visible, it can't be undone. This is not simply about unmasking them. It's also about you. Because your refusal to feed the facade is what allows the exposure to happen. You're the one who breaks the spell. You may not even raise your voice. You might simply stay calm, remain unwavering, speak plainly. But that calm truthfulness becomes a mirror. It reflects reality back to the narcissist and to everyone around them. And in that reflection, the mask begins to wilt. Understand this deeply. When the narcissist's mask slips, it's not only a moment of their downfall, it's a moment of your ascension. It means you no longer live inside their script. You're no longer mesmerized by the image. You finally see the human being behind the performance, and that clarity changes you permanently. Of course, they'll loathe it. They'll feel exposed, humiliated, stripped of their protective narrative. They might even frantically try to rebuild the mask, clinging to their performance like a drowning person clings to a piece of driftwood. But the irreversible damage has already occurred. Once people have glimpsed the truth, manipulation loses its force. It's like watching a magician repeat a trick after you already know how it's done. The fascination disappears. So when you find yourself in that moment, when the narcissist's carefully built persona tears open in front of others, don't be afraid. Don't protect the illusion out of sympathy or habit. Let it fall. That moment is truth asserting itself. It's reality undoing the lie. And although it may feel uncomfortable, it is necessary. It is the collapse of falsehood and the emergence of freedom. And perhaps that is the genuine victory after all. You don't conquer a narcissist by engaging in battle. You defeat them by standing in what is real, by withdrawing your participation, by allowing their illusion to crumble on its own. And when it does, something becomes clear. They never possessed the power they claimed. They only borrowed it from your belief, from your energy, from your willingness to play along. When you reclaim those things, the illusion collapses completely, and what remains is truth, unfiltered, unadorned, and liberating. That is the ground where real strength begins. And when a narcissist finally recognizes that they've been defeated, when they can no longer twist your emotions, no longer shape the narrative, no longer distort reality to uphold their ego, they perform one last dramatic transformation. They rewrite themselves as the victim, and not just any victim, but the deeply wounded, profoundly misunderstood martyr who gave everything only to be betrayed. It's astonishing how quickly this shift happens. One day, they're the triumphant hero. The next, they're the forsaken soul everyone should pity. But this transformation is not humility. It's strategy. It is the final survival mechanism of a collapsing ego. Narcissists can't tolerate accountability. To accept responsibility would require them to confront the shame they've buried all their lives. They would have to admit they were wrong, that their image of superiority was hollow, that the world they built inside their mind is imaginary. They cannot do that, so they rewrite the story. They cast you, the one who found freedom, the one who spoke truth, the one who refused to be controlled, as the villain. You become the ungrateful one, the heartless one, the betrayer, and they remain the hero of their own imagination. You might hear them say things like, "After everything I did for you," or "You're not the same person anymore." And you need to understand what those words actually mean. They don't mean you've turned cruel. They mean you've stopped being their supply. They mean you've grown, you've built boundaries, you've stepped out of their shadow, and to them, that feels like abandonment. Because in their world, love means ownership, boundaries mean disobedience, growth means betrayal, and your freedom becomes the biggest threat they have ever faced. Their version of connection is really compliance dressed up as closeness. And when that compliance ends, they scramble to twist the narrative in whatever way makes them look noble. I've watched this unfold in families, workplaces, relationships. Anywhere someone finally gathers the strength to end the pattern and refuse to be controlled. The moment the cycle breaks, the manipulator rushes to rewrite the story. Suddenly, you'll hear, "I don't know what happened. They just turned on me," or "They're so ungrateful after everything I've done." They start casting themselves as the tragic figure, the one who cared too deeply, gave too generously, loved too intensely. It's a performance, and for a while, it often works. People see the trembling voice, the dramatic sadness, the self-pity, and they believe it because most have no idea what sits underneath. But here's the reality behind that display. What you're seeing in those moments isn't authenticity, it's self-defense. It's them scrambling to repair the fractured mirror of their identity. They cannot tolerate a reflection that shows them falling short. So they alter it. They construct a story where they're the injured party, not because it's true, but because it's the only way they can protect themselves from the truth that just confronted them. Think of it like this. Their sense of identity is a book they've been drafting for years. And in that book, they're always cast as the misunderstood genius, the exceptional one, the person wronged by a world that never appreciated them enough. But then, someone like you enters the picture and refuses to play the scripted part. You stop being the devoted admirer, the savior, or the convenient scapegoat. You put the book down and walk away. That's when panic takes over, because without your participation, the entire storyline collapses. So they do what they've always done. They rewrite. They pick up the same events, twist the meaning, adjust the dialogue, and publish a new version where you're the villain and they're the wounded hero struggling through life's unfair trials. And here's the tough truth to swallow. They won't keep this revised story to themselves. They'll spread it everywhere, to acquaintances, co-workers, relatives, anyone who will offer a sympathetic ear. They'll retell it with such intensity that even you might start to question your own memory. You'll catch yourself thinking, maybe I reacted too strongly, maybe I wasn't patient enough, but you weren't wrong. You were simply stepping out from under a weight that was never meant to rest on your shoulders. Remember that especially when you see them using sympathy as a tool to gain leverage, when they adopt the role of the victim, it isn't healing they're chasing, it's backup. They want allies. They're seeking pity because pity functions just like the validation they lost. It feeds them, stabilizes them, and keeps their illusion upright. Emotional power is still power, even when it's wrapped in tears. So when they start reshaping the narrative, don't waste your breath trying to correct it. You can't argue someone out of a story they require to feel okay. Instead, hold on to your truth and let time take care of the rest. Because truth lasts. Lies might sprint, but they don't endure. Eventually, their contradictions show. Eventually, their performance becomes exhausting to maintain. And while they're busy defending the fiction they created, you will be quietly building a life rooted in honesty rather than theatrics. So when they paint themselves as the suffering one, don't fight to make them understand you. They can't. Their version isn't built on reality, it's built on survival instinct. Let them keep their rewritten tale. Your freedom doesn't depend on them admitting anything. It depends entirely on you choosing to live in what's real. And when you commit to that, something powerful begins to happen. Their narrative begins to shrink. It stops influencing your thoughts. It stops demanding your explanation. It stops holding emotional weight. That's when you truly win, not by forcing them to confess, but by reaching a point where their story no longer defines you in any way. Eventually, you look at the tragedy they've crafted around themselves and feel nothing but distance. That's peace. That's liberation. That's the moment you stop being a character inside their script and start writing a new chapter of your own. So now ask yourself honestly, what story are you still living inside? Are you still trying to clear your name in a drama that was fabricated from the start? Or have you finally chosen to walk off their stage entirely and begin shaping your own narrative, one built on clarity instead of confusion, truth instead of distortion? Because real freedom begins the moment you stop trying to counter their lies and start living in a way that makes those lies irrelevant. Defeating someone like that has nothing to do with revenge. It has nothing to do with proving anything. It's about rising above the entire dynamic. It's about becoming so grounded in your own reality that their illusions can't touch you anymore. You stop being their reflection. You stop being their supply. And slowly, decisively, the world around you shifts to match that truth. So think deeply. Who are you without their expectations, without their manipulation, without their minute-by-minute attempts to control the narrative? Who are you when you remove their voice from your mind? Because until you discover that, they still occupy space inside you. And maybe now is the moment to finally release that. If these words resonate with something deep within you, if you've lived through this narrative twisting and found your way back to yourself, share your experience, speak your truth, because the more people who do, the more others find the courage to reclaim their own.